I recently had a debate with Andrew Gold about clickbait and sensationalism in videos and how you package your content. And his argument is that you have to package your content in a provocative way. And that's just part of the game. I disagree. I think there's a responsibility to provide value and also not fan the flames of a culture war if you're in the cultural space. It's different if you've got a podcast like Kill Tony, where it's about comedy. If he puts a clickbaity title on it, I don't give a shit. Unless it's something using his influence to somehow scare the culture in a certain direction. But I mean, it's a different vibe when you're clicking on a Kill Tony video to laugh compared to clicking on a cultural, political podcast where you have ex-prime ministers on. So my argument is that we will have a responsibility, especially in this societal space, to be careful that we're not fear-mongering and fanning the flames of the culture wars. But with that, the thing that baffles me is this rise, and I don't know if it is a rise or if I've just gotten more sensitive to it, but hypocrisy. And how many people there are that are so hypocritical, yet no one seems to bat an eye. And I don't know, maybe we can sort of workshop this together, but I wonder why there's this desensitization to hypocrisy. And I think it goes hand in hand with the luxury beliefs idea. The enabler of luxury beliefs working at conveying status is a desensitization to hypocrisy. Because if you're sensitive to this idea of hypocrisy, luxury beliefs are out the window.
Well, so the idea here is that, well, if hypocrisy is accepted in society, then luxury beliefs are perfectly fine. If I express one set of values but then privately live by another, then we can't judge or condemn or what have you. I mean, I think that logic, it applies in certain cases. It's kind of inconsistent whether we are permissive of hypocrisy or not. I think that if you, for example, are very publicly in favor of, say, climate change reforms, but then privately we learn that you never recycle, I think a lot of people would condemn you for that, for being a hypocrite.
But I think it depends. I think it depends on the convenience. If it's a political football that's ready to be kicked or not.
I mean, that's definitely true. But, I do see, celebrities, like regularly, if you see, like on Instagram, some celebrity will say, oh, we need to fight climate change. And then their next, reel or whatever is them like getting on their own private jet, increasing carbon or whatever. Then you'll see comments in there, like sort of calling out this mismatch between their professed beliefs versus their own behavior. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think generally people don't have a lot of tolerance for hypocrisy, for values that they believe are very important or that they hold dear to themselves. So, but that is, it's an interesting point. And for the luxury beliefs idea, I think people maybe people resonated with this idea because they noticed this was happening in society, that a lot of people who were well off were espousing one set of views but living by another, but they didn't necessarily know how to articulate it. And then the luxury beliefs idea gave them sort of a framework to understand it. But the hypocrisy component is a part of it. There's always been some level, because, this idea focuses primarily on elites, say like the top income decile, people who are educated and affluent and well off and wield a lot of social and political influence on society. There's always been some level of elite hypocrisy, but I think I favor the old model of elite hypocrisy more than the new way that people do it. What I'll sometimes call the old model, like the John F. Kennedy model of hypocrisy, where, so, by now everyone knows that, Kennedy was famously a philanderer and, absentee father, and he was a very flawed man in his private life. But publicly, he thought it was important to set this example for the American public of being a good father, being a good husband. Like he'd play football on the White House lawn with his kids, and he would project this image that privately he would fail to live up to. And that was the old model of elites saying, here's a good way to live your life, but then privately they would, do things that maybe people would disapprove of. Today we almost have the reverse, where, There's a Yale law professor who calls our modern elites non-practicing libertines, where publicly they'll espouse non-judgmentalism, permissive around relationship formation, drug use, sex, basically this kind of you do you, who are we to say, live your life, let people enjoy things. But then privately, when you look at the lives of modern elites, they tend to live very conventional bourgeois lives where they go to college, they work hard, they get married, they have kids, and their life looks indistinguishable from what that social class, that life would have looked like 60 or 70 years ago. Sometimes I say that the modern elite, they walk the 50s and talk the 60s, and so the hypocrisy has completely reversed, where the old way was publicly I'm going to be this kind of conventionally bourgeois normal person who lives by these old traditional values, and then privately do these other things. And now it's the reverse, where publicly I'll say you can do whatever you want, have a good time, polyamory, drug use, this, that, and the other, defund the police, but then privately I'm going to live in a safe neighborhood, I'm going to get married, and I'm going to inculcate all these same values into my own children. And I think this is unsustainable in the long term, because people still look to elites for guidance and for the ideals that in the story we tell ourselves about what's worth aspiring to, and so on and so forth. And I think this ties in with your comment earlier about do people with a platform hold some responsibility for the content they're releasing or the information that they're sharing, and so on and so forth. And on the one hand, I understand, like Andrew Gold, he's a friend, and I understand his position that, you need to get people to, look at your content, and it's a very competitive online space. But on the other hand, if you have an audience, people are going to listen to you. And if you, frame your arguments in a certain way, people will take that into account, and it still matters. Sometimes I'll tell this story about how when I was in high school, this was like the Jackass era of MTV. I don't know, you may be too young to remember Jackass.
It's before my time, but I've watched it in this sort of false nostalgic state.
Yeah. Nostalgia for something maybe you never actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I was, that era of the 2000s with Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O and all those guys. And I remember even as like a 15, 16-year-old kid watching Jackass, they would have this very brief disclaimer at the beginning of like, these are all, stuntmen, these are professionals, don't try this at home. And then you'd see, 30 minutes of them doing outrageous, hilarious, dangerous stunts. And then I'd go to class the next day and go to a party that weekend, and you would see, kind of dumb, immature 15-year-old boys reenacting the stunts they just watched. And so what you see here is like, here's a 5-second disclaimer, don't try this at home. And then 30 minutes of super charismatic, funny, hilarious dudes doing extremely dangerous stunts. No one's going to be surprised when kids are imitating this behavior, right? Even though you're giving the disclaimer, even though and so I think this shows that like you do have some level of responsibility. People are going to imitate you or allow you to influence them if they respect you and admire you.